I think that if we were raised without the notions of like straight and gay as concepts, people wouldn't naturally have as strong of preferences as they do. I think that people would just be into people as a whole without gender playing a big role.
That's interesting. I kind of think it might be the reverse.
Really?
Well, there's this idea that you're not going to like the term I use, but there's this concept of social contagion. So actually, it might be the case if we didn't teach people about sexuality at all, you would see more people fall into the heterosexuality than you might see people fall into pansexuality.
Sure.
Or bisexuality.
As much as I understand where you're coming from, I do think that, in order for that to be tested, we would have to strip down everything that teaches people about, the concept of being into one gender over the other. And I think that our society is so built fundamentally on that if we just didn't openly discuss it, then the subtone or undertones of growing up are still like, you see straight couples together more than you see gay couples together. You hear about straight couples more. It's just like, it's more normalized even if we're not explicitly discussing whether or not it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I think that people can have natural inclinations towards pansexuality, homosexuality, bisexuality, whatever it is, without there being any sort of cultural, even cultural understanding of these things. And it's obviously a natural phenomenon. But there is, I think, a social component. For example, there was this study done, I believe I'm trying to think if it was in Lithuania. It was one of the, one of the Baltic countries or something, where they don't have a term for, what is it? They don't have a term for, what's it called when you get into a car accident? Whiplash. Mm-hmm. They don't have a term for this in the country. And there is I think sometimes there's a psychological component. If you create something or create a term for something, people will perhaps, I don't know what the exact word for this is, like self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Yeah.
They'll be molded into what you're saying. If you create something, they'll be molded into that.
They'll be like, oh, maybe I am that. Like, instead of being confused about something, it's like, oh, well maybe I'm bi.
Well, for example, if there was absolutely no societal understanding of transgenderism, I would suspect that people would still experience like an uneasiness, but I'm not sure if they would be able to actually attribute it to X thing.
Sure.
And so this idea that you're saying if we did away with these labels, you're transgender, or you're bisexual, or you're asexual, or you're heterosexual, you're pansexual, that more people would fall into those categories. I'm not actually sure that's the case.
Well, I do think that it is untestable just because of how fundamental those ideas are to the way that we live. But I don't know, because I'm going to make the claim that gender isn't real as well. But
what do you mean gender's not real?
Well, obviously sex is real.
Okay. But so gender's not real?
No. I think that if we weren't, like, the reason that men feel the need to be more masculine is because they are biologically stronger. So they've played more, like, masculine protective roles in history, right? That aren't necessarily, like, super prominent now because, we're living in, like, a modern society. But, yeah, I do think that these ideas that we have of like how men and women are biologically different are almost entirely nurture in the way that we're raised and the way we're taught to be. I think the only biological difference I can really think of is like, physicality and like strength and stuff like that.
You don't think there's any innate differences absent physiology?
Well, I can't say that 100%. We don't really know. I personally don't really believe so, but I have no way of being sure.
So you don't believe that there's sort of generalized inclinations? Like I would agree, for example, there are some women who are more masculine or, whatever would fall under the label of masculinity than there are some men. Like there's feminine men.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I think it's fair to say that men tend to lean towards masculinity, women tend to lean towards femininity, regardless of nurture.
Sure, but I think that nurture is, like, the nurture I'm talking about is within everyone. It's just the way that we're raised, what we see when we're walking down the street, the way that we see people who look and speak like us act, you know? Like, growing up, I watched the women in my life act in much more feminine ways. I watched the men in my life be much more masculine. So I think even if it wasn't like a conscious, I was being told that you have to be ladylike or feminine, I was still observing that, and the people I associated with were acting in those ways.
What if I told you that there were studies with very young children, very young, before they can even conceptualize, and maybe you'll make the argument that while even under 1 year old, there's already nurture influence taking place that creates this difference between male and female. But these studies, before an age where you can conceptualize these sorts of things, and really there can be much influence based on nurture, that you will see differences between boys and girls in terms of their interest in, like, toys, for example. And they'll naturally gravitate towards certain things or certain types of play, even at a very young age.
Sure.
So I think that this would counter your idea that things are strictly nurture.
I think that there are a lot of difficulties with a study like that. I mean, unless the children were raised, like, obviously we don't know if in the first year, I mean, we can assume that they are already picking up on things. Children have to learn to smile. They have to learn to laugh, Like, things that we assume to be innate really aren't. They're just observing more than we assume. But yeah, I think that for a study like that to really be accurate, they would have to be, like, raised in captivity, essentially.
So you're saying, essentially then, using your logic, all studies, regardless of the age of the participants, they must be held in captivity, away from influence from the world?
Well, not
for a study?
necessarily, because
So should we, I mean, that would be the extension of your logic. We should just throw away all studies then, because these individuals, I mean, it would even apply more to, like, sociological, psychological studies conducted on adults. They've had 18 years of programming, whereas, babies who are under 1 year have had less programming, let's say.
Sure, but I think the difference between those two is this study specifically is trying to study nature. We're trying to discuss how people innately are. If we're doing studies on adults, we're always operating under the assumption that their nurture has played a part, right? So you don't necessarily need those factors exempt because it's acknowledged that it's going to play into the results. If we acknowledge that the nature or the nurture of those children play into the results, then it negates the idea that it's their nurture making them gravitate to those toys.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to really agree there. Again, when you're conducting these sorts of experiments with very young children, I don't think that there's, at least my position would be, while there might be some degree of nurture that has occurred, I don't think it's sufficient enough to override the sort of innate biological influence that is going to be as a result of somebody's sex.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, for example, I mean, there's other studies too where generally speaking, men have a greater tendency towards ideas or towards things, and women have a greater tendency towards people. Mm-hmm. So this would manifest itself in professions. Women have a greater push towards professions that involve people, whereas men have a greater push towards professions that involve things or ideas. So, like, that's why you see more men in engineering, for example, and that's why you see more women in healthcare, or you see more women in jobs like social work or jobs like teaching, for example.
Sure, and I think that can be boiled down to it's rooted from sex, not gender. The reason that men are more inclined to jobs like that is because they are physically stronger. They're built for jobs that they can use they don't have to be personable for. They don't have, I'm getting at here. Yeah. When it comes to women, obviously I can't confidently say it. Women haven't been put in workplaces for a very long time. Women
have always been involved in.
Of course they've been involved, but women have never been viewed as capable in the way that men have been. Women have had this idea that they, belong in the house, they belong to uplift men rather than be their own person. And that's only very recently being deconstructed.
Well, hold on. There's a whole bunch there that you've smuggled in that I would have to address.
This is real life.
Like, whoa.
There's a whole bunch.
That was a
there's
lot.
a whole bunch smuggled in there. So, I dispute this idea that that women weren't deemed as capable. Also, really quick, just to rewind here, when I'm talking about engineering. You're talking about physical labor. When I'm talking about engineering, I'm talking about that's purely mental for the most part.
I understand. I misunderstood you there.
So there's no prohibition or limit on women entering engineering, at least today, due to any sort of physical strength differential between men and women. Engineering is purely a mental endeavor. Well, in terms of the thought process of engineering, actually seeing it through, you need construction workers or, whatever it is to actually have the physical capacity and strength to be able to do that. But moving off of that, though, hold on. You said that women have been basically relegated to the household for the benefit of men. I would disagree with your assessment there. I think for the benefit, I would like to perhaps rephrase your statement to the benefit of the family and to society, not to the benefit solely of men. And then also I would just say that we would also have to apply this to men too. Men have been relegated to danger for most of human history and viewed as disposable. They've been relegated to back-breaking physical work, to being essentially wallets, and relegated to being put through the meat grinder of war. If we do a comparison between this expectation then on men and compare it to women, I don't know if women got that much of I don't think they got a really unfair shake historically in modern day that they get to be provided for and they get to enjoy the comfort of the household while men go out into the world and either fight or work. And oftentimes, we see this also, men die much earlier. There's a whole bunch of reasons for this. Men typically die 5 years sooner than women. Why would this be? It seems like actually women have a lot of privileged positions. I would say women tend to live healthier lives. Women live longer. This would probably indicate women have some degree of privilege over men.
Well, I'm not claiming that the system benefits men. I don't think this is good for anyone. What
system are you referring to?
The concept of like the nuclear family, like the women in the household, men out at work. I don't think that this is good for men either. I think that it's negative for women because, they are definitely viewed down upon. They're not given their own independence, or at least haven't been. And definitely are expected to just kind of dole their own aspirations for the sake of the family. However, I don't think that it's good for men either. I think a lot of men aren't capable of expressing emotion because they are expected to be strong. I think that they are pushed into positions that they don't always want to be in. I think that it also dulls their own self-expression, the way that it does for women. I think that my argument primarily is that these roles are purely negative and hurt to everyone involved.
The roles are negative.
Yes.
Okay, so the roles that we're referencing is you're talking like a more traditional gender dynamics as it relates to relationships.
As it relates to relationships and also the workplace.
The workplace. Okay. So first off, I would also say that the nuclear family can still exist, and there could be a scenario where the woman has also freedom and does work also. But do you have specific issues with the nuclear family?
Not necessarily.
Like assuming, let's say the dynamic is both people are able to pursue their career aspirations and the man and the woman is working, but they're married and have children. Do you object to that dynamic?
No, not necessarily. That term wasn't exactly what I was looking for.
Okay, so you don't have issues strictly with the nuclear family?
No.
Okay. Let's come back to this because I want to let everybody, give their relationship status and stuff, but I will make a note. We'll talk about what were all the things we were talking? We hit on.
That was a lot.
I just had a question.
You said
for
gender
her.
doesn't exist, I guess?
Yeah.
So when you say gender doesn't exist, you don't believe in gender identity then?
I think that it is definitely possible to be inclined to a certain gender identity, but I think that it is primarily, like, obviously rooted in who you are fundamentally, but I do think that the way that we are taught about gender and the way we view it as a society plays a huge role on how we view it independently.
But so if you reject gender, do you only acknowledge sex?
No, I don't think that something has to be real for it to bring people comfort. I think that, like, I personally identify as a woman because, you know, I grew up viewing myself in a feminine way. I align with femininity in that kind of sense. Do I think that that's, like, really that based in reality? Do I think that that's, like, fundamental to who I am? No, but it brings me comfort.
But when you say, so you reject gender, is that
Yes.
correct? So, but when you say the word woman,
Yes.
you say you're a woman.
Yes.
Okay. So when you say woman, are you alluding to sex?
No, I don't think it's a real concept. I think that to
Well,
say...
no, you said gender's not a real concept.
Yes.
But
Be-
you said sex is a real concept.
Yeah, woman is reference to gender. I would say females in
But
relation
you
to
just,
sex.
here's my confusion, is you reject gender, but now you're saying that woman relates to gender.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's...
But you reject gender.
I do.
So you're using woman to relate to sex then?
No, I'm using it to relate to gender.
But you reject gender.
I do.
So how does that reconcile that for me?
Okay, bear with me on this. It's gonna take a little bit. I think that woman as a concept, it's not a super real thing. It is just this term that we associate with femininity because we associate women with, like, the female sex, right? I don't think that being a woman is a real thing. Being a female is a real
You
thing.
agree? I see you shaking your head. Do you agree with this?
Yeah.
Oh, I love this take because I just
And
sound
just keep
crazy.
trying to ask.
Are
You
you
went
sure
to
you agree
school.
with
You
this?
have an education.
Oh, is that hard to believe?
No, it's not hard to believe. I'm just asking. You have an
Yes.
education in your degrees in what?
Positive?
Writing and
She's
literature.
working
Okay.
on it.
Did you take any gender studies and things like that at the
Yes.
school? Okay.
I'm a big fan of those classes, in
Yeah,
case
I
you
can
couldn't tell.
I can
I
tell.
can't wait for you to weigh in on this. Please regale me.
But you're taking writing classes?
Primarily.
Okay,
Here.
so what's your degree going to be in?
Writing and literature.
Okay.
Yeah, when I say that I'm a woman, I don't think that that term actually holds real weight. I think that it's just this idea we have. I think societal constructs can be real to us, even if they're not actually based in anything.
Here, we're going to blast through we're coming back to this. Let's just finish.